Dee and I were high school sweethearts, despite having attended different high schools. We initially met while working at a restaurant and immediately established a strong rapport. Our mutual attraction was palpable, and I was convinced that our bond was genuine. Both our families were supportive of our relationship, and Dee's cousin Shannon also became one of my closest friends. We frequently spent time together. By the time we graduated, we had been together for nearly 2 years. I had plans to join the army while she was going to attend a local college. We were devastated and heartbroken. I even considered proposing to her before leaving for the army. We discussed it, and she said she would accept, but ultimately we agreed to wait a bit longer. Despite my heart being broken, I was imbued with a strong conviction that we were destined to be together forever. I proceeded to undertake basic training, during which I was permitted to contact her on only 3 occasions. However, we maintained a regular correspondence, exchanging letters on a near-daily basis. It was uncommon for me to receive fewer than 3 letters from her during each mail call. She accompanied my parents to my basic training graduation, which was a highly emotional experience. It served to reinforce my belief that we were meant to be together. Once my training in the Army was completed, I was stationed at Fort Hood, Texas, serving in the 1st Cavalry Division. I spent the majority of my paychecks on phone calls to Dee and saved up for plane tickets, either for my visits home or for her to come see me. I would make it back home approximately every 6 months, and she visited me twice in 2 years. Upon returning home from the Army, I felt a sense of joyous celebration in light of the love I shared with Dee. After 2 years of service, I felt prepared to propose marriage. I purchased an inexpensive engagement ring and began making plans for my next trip back home. However, I soon received a letter from Dee's cousin, Shannon. In it, Shannon informed me that Dee had been unfaithful to me. I was deeply affected by this revelation and immediately called Shannon to inquire further. She revealed that Dee had been secretly involved with another man when Shannon confronted Dee about it. Dee dismissed the situation as merely fooling around and reassured Shannon that I was still her future husband. I inquired about the identity of the man with whom Dee had been fooling around. Shannon was initially reluctant to divulge this information, likely due to concerns about creating further complications. However, her reluctance led me to suspect that the man might be someone I knew. I was able to ascertain that the individual in question was someone I had known since our shared junior high education. We had remained close friends ever since. I requested that Shannon not inform Dee of my knowledge of the affair. My initial intention had been to surprise her with a visit and marriage proposal. However, my plans had changed. I now intended to confront her about the matter. I was overcome with a sense of betrayal. Consequently, approximately 1 week later, I made the decision to return home and confront both Dee and M. I initially attempted to locate Dee at her residence, but she was not present. I then proceeded to M's apartment, which was in a state of disrepair. I observed the presence of a vehicle belonging to M, and I proceeded to knock on the door. M's roommate, who was not a close acquaintance of mine, answered. He was visibly distressed and unable to communicate effectively. I inquired if I could enter and speak with M. I was invited in to speak with my acquaintance M. He attempted to provide an evasive answer, but upon mentioning that I had observed M's vehicle outside, he permitted my entry. Upon entering the residence, I could hear M and Dee engaged in a heated discussion in the latter's bedroom. M was known for being vocal, which was one of the qualities I found appealing about him. He then proceeded to inform M of my presence by shouting down the hallway. He subsequently took his seat on the couch, where he watched eagerly. The dramatic situation gradually unfolded. After approximately 5 minutes, MD finally emerged from the bedroom. I was devastated to see her walking out of the room with a smile on her face. However, her smile quickly faded as soon as she laid eyes on me standing there in the dining room. I simply stood there silently staring at her for a moment. She began to make some excuse, but I remained silent. I turned on my heel and departed. I was utterly devastated. It felt as though my world had come crashing down. I descended into a deep depression. I returned to Fort Hood and simply went through the motions, operating on autopilot during the initial weeks. I received numerous letters from Dee begging for forgiveness and requesting that I call her so that she could explain herself. However, I chose not to respond. I loved Dee so much. I considered that if I had seen her or spoken to her, I would have forgiven her. However, I was unable to envisage spending my life with someone I could never trust. I did make a few calls to Shannon, who mentioned that Dee was upset and angry that I would not give her a second chance. Perhaps if it had not been one of my closest friends, I might have considered it, but the sense of betrayal I experienced was too overwhelming. I was unable to trust her again. Life progressed, and I lost contact with Shannon and all my former friends from before my time in the army. I met another woman and subsequently married her. We had a son together, and nearly 20 years had passed since my heart was shattered. One day, while attending one of my son's pee-wee football practices, I encountered Shannon. It transpired that her son was on the same team. As it transpired, Shannon and M had continued their relationship after Dee and I ended ours, approximately 1 year later. M became pregnant, but as soon as he discovered this, he disappeared, leaving Dee as a single mother with many regrets. She has been unable to sustain a relationship for longer than 3 months since then. Shannon informed me that Dee still considers me to be the love of her life. Dee expressed that she considers me the most important person in her life and believes that no other man can compare to me. Shannon indicated that Dee wishes she could reverse the course of events and prevent herself from negatively impacting the relationship she had with me. However, I advised against this course of action, emphasizing that Shannon's desire to move on should not involve any direct contact with me. On the day in question, I experienced difficulties in forming close relationships with other men. I maintained a defensive stance to protect myself from potential emotional distress, which occasionally impeded my ability to fully express myself to my wife. It is important to note that I hold a profound affection for my wife and would never engage in actions that could jeopardize our marriage. However, I continue to have residual feelings that Dee was the love of my life. If she were to reappear in my life today, it would be challenging for me to resist the temptation to fall for her again. Second story, approximately 4 years ago, I was involved in a romantic relationship with a woman who seemed to embody all the qualities I sought in a partner. We shared a penchant for dark humor and a similar interest in activities and music. We could converse for hours on a vast array of topics. She was the kind of person I felt compelled to dedicate my life to. We were similarly inclined to embark on adventures together, exploring the highest mountains and the deepest valleys. One factor that facilitated our relationship was our mutual agreement on not wanting children. Whenever we went out to eat and saw a bunch of kids, we would opt to get our food to go. Her parents and friends adored me, which was a positive development, as I had only recently relocated to the area before we began dating. She even informed me that I was the most patient and understanding boyfriend she had ever had. Despite attending different colleges in separate states, we managed to maintain a relationship. She even came to my school for a week before her classes began, and once she left, we stayed in touch through Skype and text messages all day long. However, there were indications that our relationship was changing. She became less talkative and seemed less enthusiastic when we spoke, so during a short break I had from school, I decided to visit her. We spent 3 days together and worked through any. After a period of stability, the pattern of behavior resumed. She became less communicative and appeared to be preoccupied with social activities, frequently socializing with friends who resided in close proximity to my parents' residence. Initially, I attributed this to a need for increased physical proximity and the impact of distance. To address this, I devised a plan to surprise her. The issue was that, as a financially constrained college student without gainful employment or a vehicle, I was unable to simply drive to her location. Furthermore, I lacked the financial resources to procure a plane or bus ticket. However, I packed my backpack with essential supplies and a duffel bag with approximately 4 days' worth of clothing. Then, I proceeded to the truck stop situated near the interstate and inquired of a few truckers the direction in which they were headed. It took me approximately 15 hours to reach her, a distance of 500 miles. The journey would typically take 10 hours by car, which was relatively straightforward. However, I had to switch semi-trucks on 4 occasions during the journey. Upon reaching the town where my parents lived, approximately 400 miles from my college and 100 miles from her college, I borrowed my brother's pickup truck. I arrived later than anticipated and was informed by her roommates, whom I had met during my previous visit, that she was not present. I was permitted to sleep in her room while awaiting her arrival. The following morning, she had not yet materialized, so I sent her a text message. I simply inquired as to her whereabouts, and she replied that she was simply spending time with her friend Zane. At this point, I began to feel somewhat suspicious, but I did not allow this to trouble me unduly. I asked her roommates where Zane resided, and they provided me with the details of his dormitory accommodation. I proceeded to make my way there, I left my clothes in her room but took my backpack with me. I proceeded to the third floor, where Zane resided, and began scanning the doors for his name. I eventually located the door marked Zane. I knocked on the door, but there was no response. I tried again, but still received no answer. I surmised that they were probably elsewhere on campus, so I retraced my steps and began to ascend the stairs. Upon reaching the topmost step, I paused and extracted my pack of cigarettes, intending to smoke as I traversed the remainder of the campus. Then, an unmistakable sound, one that nobody ever wishes to hear, emanated from my vicinity. It was a wrenching sound, indicative of distress, emanated from within. A sound of overwhelming intensity. It was as though the world had been suddenly deprived of color. My mind began to race, my heartbeat accelerated, and my muscles tensed. I swiftly turned around and opened the nearby window, sticking my head out to draw in some fresh air. I remained there for approximately 30 seconds, simply observing the sun. Despite the cold, late fall weather, it was a bright day. Glancing back at the door behind me, I saw his name, Zane, clearly visible. I had initially overlooked it, but now I was determined to gain entry. With resolve, I knocked. I knocked on the door loudly and forcefully, but I was unsure of what to say, so the first words that came out were, "Hey, come out here." The sounds inside ceased, and I heard the voice of the man on the other side of the door say, "Room service." I chuckled to myself, as I was not expecting such a response. I knocked again, this time more insistently, and declared, "I know you're in there." He responded, "Leave them by the door." At that moment, I realized that she had no idea it was me knocking on the door. I had been growing more and more anxious. I became aware that I was still holding a cigarette. I proceeded to exit the room, propping the door open with my backpack. I sent her another text message, writing, "Hey, it's me D." She replied promptly, inquiring about my presence outside and suggesting that we engage in a discussion. I proposed that I was currently smoking another cigarette and requested her presence outside. She did not emerge from the room even after I had finished the cigarette. Consequently, I returned to the upper level of the residence. I lightly knocked on the door, refraining from verbal communication. The gravity of the situation was evident. The experience was emotionally overwhelming, and I felt a profound sense of fatigue throughout my entire body. After a couple of seconds, she opened the door and I saw the man quickly enter the closet in the background. She gave a small, defeated smile that seemed to convey a sense of hopelessness. She attempted to speak, but her words failed to emerge. She exited the room, appearing as if she were a puppy with its tail between its legs. She was on the verge of tears. I placed my hands on her shoulders and attempted to offer comfort. I was experiencing a profound sense of distress, and I was struggling to maintain my composure. "May we go outside and converse? I require another cigarette." "Very well," in the quietest voice imaginable. Over the course of 12 hours, they engaged in a series of intense discussions within her dormitory room. Following this, they continued to exchange messages via text for a period of 2 months. I had the opportunity to see her one final time when I visited my parents. The encounter was characterized by significant distress, but that is a topic for another discussion. Ultimately, the individual with whom she had engaged in infidelity became the father of her child. Both of them subsequently withdrew from their respective educational programs. She was a first-year student, while he was in his final year with only 1 semester remaining. Neither of them returned to their studies. She relocated to a city situated 4 hours' drive from the place of residence of our parents. As previously stated, the child's father resides with his parents. The child is now almost 3 years of age. She exhibits symptoms of depression, has few friends, and is technically separated from her father's partner. However, they remain in a relationship. They have chosen to live separately, despite their continued romantic involvement. It is evident that she regrets having a child, as she had never expressed a desire for one. Given the circumstances, it is crucial to address the following. My wife has been engaging in extramarital relations with another man for the past 7 months. Initially, it was an emotional affair, but it soon escalated. We have been together for 23 years and have 8 children. In the 5 months leading up to this revelation, she had me convinced that I was the source of problems in our relationship. I was unable to comprehend why she repeatedly brought up past issues and seemed to be perpetually dissatisfied. The other man in question is her high school ex-boyfriend, who is currently married with 4 children. The boyfriend is currently married with 4 children of his own. The most peculiar aspect of this situation is that he resides in a different state, yet is only a few miles away from where they both attended high school. Approximately 7 months ago, my wife initiated contact with him. She then proceeded to visit her parents in September and October, during which time she has admitted to seeing him during those trips, yet she refuses to admit if they had any closeness. When I attempted to obtain a straightforward answer, she employed linguistic strategies designed to obfuscate the truth. I am certain that they had phone closeness and even engaged in it in our own home. The day I discovered this was 19 days ago at 3 a.m. I began composing a message. I considered confronting my wife, but then I reflected that decisions made in the middle of the night are often not the most prudent. Consequently, I deleted the message, but unfortunately, I inadvertently sent a blank one the next day. My wife attempted to call me, but I was at work and did not receive the call. My wife was visibly upset, and she accused me of being the primary antagonist in this situation. When I inquired about the reason for her distress, she replied that I was responsible for the current state of affairs. If the other man's wife was aware of their affair, my wife informed me that he was coping well with the situation a week later. The other man's wife posted a grateful message on Facebook, thanking her husband for teaching her about unconditional love and other related topics. As of today, 19 days later, they are spending hours on the phone daily while I am working. Let us examine the advantages and disadvantages of contacting the other man's wife. If I were in her position, unaware of the circumstances, I would undoubtedly seek to ascertain the truth. Conversely, and perhaps this is an unwise approach, I still retain a modicum of hope for reconciliation and contacting the wife. It is unlikely that this will be of assistance today. I have just attended my first meeting with a lawyer, during which he unexpectedly suggested that I should make contact with the other man's wife. However, the few family members and close friends with whom I have discussed the matter are against the idea. I am not surprised, given that my wife is a complete narcissist who believes her own lies. I was still incredulous when I observed her spending half the day locked in a room texting and calling her affair partner. I saw all the texts she sent, and I am convinced that she is not as sneaky as she thinks she is. Instead of being with our children, she has the nerve to tell me that the children are her top priority. I will never understand how she could throw away our 23 years together and our 8 children. It is futile to attempt to comprehend her actions, they are simply irrational. She is a narcissist who has acknowledged the wrongfulness of her actions yet persists in them. This behavior is tantamount to sociopathy. I even inquired as to whether she would forgive me if I had committed the same transgressions, and she unequivocally replied in the negative. Nevertheless, she continues to engage in these actions. With regard to the affair, the only thing she seems to fear is my exposure of the affair to others. However, I am unsure how long this fear will last. My lawyer has advised me not to contact the other man's wife until we have legal protections in place. I am currently awaiting this. Her complete disrespect towards me and our children is a source of great distress for me. It is evident that the children are unaware of the circumstances surrounding their parents' separation. In order to ascertain the potential benefits and drawbacks of contacting the other man's wife, it is necessary to consider the following. On the one hand, if I were in her situation and unaware of the truth, I would undoubtedly desire to be informed of the developments. On the other hand, and perhaps this is a somewhat naive perspective, I still retain a glimmer of hope. It is unlikely that contacting the other woman will facilitate reconciliation. Today, I had my first meeting with a lawyer who surprisingly suggested reaching out to the other man's wife. However, the few family members and close friends I have consulted are largely opposed to this idea. I am not surprised, given that I am aware of my wife's shortcomings. My wife is a narcissist who is adept at self-deception. I was nevertheless taken aback when I discovered that she had spent half the day locked in a room texting and calling her affair partner. I saw all the messages. She is not as sneaky as she thinks. Instead of being with our children, she has chosen to pursue her extramarital relationship. This has caused me significant distress. To compound the issue, she has the audacity to claim that the children are her primary concern. It is difficult to fathom how she could discard 23 years of shared history and 8 children. I have ceased attempting to comprehend her actions, they are irrational. She is a narcissist who has acknowledged the wrongfulness of her actions yet persists in them. This is nearly sociopathic behavior. I inquired as to whether she would forgive me if I had committed the same infidelity she did. She responded in the negative. However, she persists in her illicit relationship. Her primary concern seems to be the potential exposure of her infidelity to others. It is unclear how long this fear will persist. My legal counsel has advised me to refrain from contacting the other man's wife until we have secured legal protection. I am awaiting the implementation of a restraining order. It is disturbing to observe her disregard for me and our children. My children are unaware of the circumstances surrounding our separation. My primary objective is to shield them from the emotional distress associated with this situation. However, I am unable to do so. This is the most challenging experience I have encountered. While I have been able to manage my intense feelings of anger to some extent through therapy, it is becoming increasingly difficult to maintain this control. The therapeutic sessions have the opposite effect, evoking the previously repressed emotions anew. A month after the divorce petition was filed, the respondent responded, indicating her intention to take the children and relocate to her parents' residence, which was conveniently located just 5 minutes away from her former partner. 3 months later, the lawyer and mediator finally succeeded in persuading her that her chances of success in the relocation case were minimal, particularly given the strong opposition from the children. The teenage children made it clear that they did not wish to relocate, which prompted the wife to reconsider her position and decide to retain the marital home. She even informed the mediator that the local community would prefer her to remain in the property. However, she subsequently received feedback from individuals in the neighborhood indicating that, were their spouses to have behaved in a similar manner, the other party would be sleeping in a tent on the front lawn. This prompted her to withdraw her claim to the marital home. I am ambivalent about retaining the property. I would welcome a fresh start following her infidelity, but my older children have requested that I remain in the residence with their younger siblings. She has not communicated with me for over 3 months, despite our continued cohabitation. Consequently, I am uncertain about her intentions. In the most favorable scenario, she would resume cohabitation with her partner, assuming he would leave his wife and 4 children and allow the children to reside with me for the academic year. This would undoubtedly be challenging. I would be absent from the children's lives for the majority of the summer, but at least I would not have to endure repeated confrontations with my former partner. Unfortunately, after she ceased her efforts to relocate, she decided not to move, at least not immediately. In retrospect, I am astonished that I attempted to reconcile with her. At the time, I was unaware of the extent of her involvement with another individual. She contacted me yesterday, stating that she wished to speak with me today. However, we have not communicated for 3 months. I had anticipated that the conversation would focus on the children, the house, or alimony. Therefore, I attempted to remain emotionally neutral as I initiated the discussion. Initially, she attempted to justify her actions but then abruptly expressed regret. She then proceeded to provide vague and evasive explanations, such as claiming that she had never intended to cause pain or that her closeness to another man was merely an unintentional occurrence. I was somewhat taken aback to hear her utter the S word. I do not believe her apology, and I informed her that her actions are a more reliable indicator of her sincerity than her words. I made it clear that I do not believe her, but I wonder if this indicates that she is beginning to emerge from her affair-induced haze. She expressed hope that we could resume communication, but I made it clear that I never wanted to stop talking in the first place. I informed her that every aspect of our relationship, including the affair, the subsequent divorce proceedings, and the lack of communication, was a result of her own actions. She then stated that she was ready to engage in constructive dialogue without any trace of resentment. However, she conveniently overlooked the fact that she was still involved in an extramarital relationship. I then clarified that, to the best of my knowledge, she was still in contact with her former partner. She attempted to dismiss this by stating that she asserted that the answer was inconsequential. I emphasized that it was of significant importance to me. The conversation lasted approximately 5 minutes and did not result in any tangible changes. I am curious whether the reality of the situation might be gradually becoming apparent to her. If you require further details, I would recommend reviewing my previous posts in which I discuss my divorce from my former spouse who engaged in infidelity, deceit, and extramarital relationships. My wife and I have been married for approximately 8 months. However, as confirmed a couple of months ago, her family is aware of the divorce but not the infidelity and extramarital relationship. I am aware that she has portrayed me in a negative light, but I am unable to control this perception and therefore I do not concern myself with it. Nevertheless, I am curious as to why they believe that I was the one who initiated the separation. A few months ago, I wrote a letter to my in-laws to express my gratitude for their support over the years. In the letter, I also mentioned the affair. They are aware of the identity of the person with whom my wife was involved, but I made it clear that I expect them to support their daughter and let them know they can contact me if they ever want to talk. Despite this, I am starting to lose patience with the situation. In the aforementioned letter, I expressed my gratitude for being exemplary grandparents to my children and for providing invaluable support to our family over the years. I also mentioned the affair. They are aware of the identity of the individual with whom their daughter was involved, but I made it clear that I expect them to support their daughter and let them know they can contact me if they ever want to talk, although I don't really expect them to. My lawyer advised against sending the letter, and for almost 8 months I followed that advice. However, I am becoming increasingly weary of allowing her to control me in light of recent developments. My lawyer advised me to wait and see if her stance becomes more aggressive. Ultimately, however, the decision rests with me. I sought the opinion of my therapist, who did not perceive any issue with me sharing the letter with friends and family. There is a divided opinion on whether I should send the letter. I discussed the matter with the school counselor, who suggested arranging a meeting for our younger children, aged 13, 11, 9 and 7, to assess how they are coping with the divorce. As far as I am aware, only the 13-year-old is aware of my situation. The discovery of the affair was made by the soon-to-be ex-husband through his older sister, prior to my own awareness of the situation. I obtained the requisite forms for both parties and informed her of this via email, which is our sole mode of communication. Her response was that I should have discussed this with her beforehand and that she would consider whether or not to allow the children to see the counselor. To be frank, I am not surprised by her reaction. It was largely in line with my expectations. I replied that I do not require her permission to explore options for the children and that I have not taken any steps without her consent. I also made it clear that I hope she will prioritize the mental well-being of the children. Once she has had an opportunity to consider this proposal, she will be in a position to evaluate whether or not it is in the best interests of our children, who have been exposed to a communication environment that is less than optimal. It is therefore possible that the involvement of a counselor may prove beneficial in enabling our children to avoid experiencing similar difficulties.